Hello and welcome to the B&H virtual event space. This is the first of 2025 with our event space sage, Sony Artisan, Chris Orwig, and he's here to talk about creating portraits that matter. Welcome back, Chris.
Fred, so good to see you. So good to be here. So excited about this. This really kicks off a series of webinars where the goal is to go from zero to hero, to explore how to bring people from the very beginning to all the way to the end of capturing amazing portraits. And so we're going to cover things like foundational topics, using AI for retouching, gear, posing, you name it. And this is the first of a series of webinars. So I'm super excited about it.
Nice. Yeah, I always listen to our events, but I think I'm coming in with a little more intent on this one.
Okay.
Like I'm technically sound, I, I'm getting, I have my lighting down to a
Yes,
certain,
yes, your lighting's so good.
but like that's not what we're exploring about portraiture today, right?
No, no. Today is kind of zooming out a little bit. And I have slides. We'll get to those in a second. But zooming out and asking the question like what matters? Photography, the world of photography has changed dramatically. And tuning into that change and then asking ourselves, well, how can we work within the current context? And how can we create work that lasts, that lingers, that has those timeless qualities? So that's a lot of what today is. And it's a foundational topic because too often I work with people, I do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, a lot of speaking, write books, and too often people will create these portraits that are good, but they are also, and I hate to say this, but a little bit irrelevant.
Run of
So
the
how do
mill.
so how do we create relevance? How do we really build something that matters in the current context in a way that's true to who we are, what we care about, and then also what the world needs? And that's a lot of what I think artists throughout time have been asking these questions. Like it's one thing if we like make something. Um, um, well, I was gonna grab a prop. Well, I'll grab a prop, but like I have this little ceramic bowl, and I love this little ceramic bowl. And it's one thing to like make a little beautiful ceramic bowl, but then it's also the question is it usable? And for me, this I use this bowl, I put all my media cards in it in a nice little sacred spot before I copy them over to my hard drives. And so the use case scenario, that bowl really matters to me, not just because it's beautiful, but it's very functional. And so we're kind of going to thread between, or not thread, we're going to kind of, well, yeah, I think thread, stitch, connect those two ideas. Beauty, wonder, awe, powerful portrait art, but also relevance.
Mhm.
Is
All
that
right.
fair?
Well, yeah, no, totally. I'm excited. I hope
Okay.
everyone watching is excited. But let me take a second to thank Sony for hosting this and remind
Yes.
everyone watching live, if you've got any questions for Chris, please leave them in the YouTube chat and we'll get around to them at the end. Chris, show's yours.
Let's do it. And the more questions, the better with this one, because this can be a great dialogue. And just want to make sure, can we see my slide deck there?
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
okay, great. Um, and the topic, as mentioned, is this idea of how do we create portraits that matter? And what I want to do is tell a little mini part of my story and kind of where I'm coming from with this. And then we're going to look at images and talk through some ideas and ideally discuss how we can do this. So I've had the chance to work with a lot of really great and interesting brands that are purpose driven, that have a strong focus. And the gear that I tend to use is this is my essential kit. I have more cameras and lenses than this, but if I am to go and do a shoot for one of those brands, the R5, the A1, and then those three lenses are always coming with me. So this is my guarantee kind of kit. And the reason why I wanted to show this kit, we'll talk about gear for portraiture extensively in another webinar, but to highlight that your gear can be relatively simple in portraiture, and that's one of the beautiful things. It doesn't need to be overly complex. I've written a number of books, seven to be exact. Last one was on authentic portraits, the one before that on creativity, the one before that on people photography or portraiture. And today we're really looking at in this context, whether we're doing creating portraits for brands or personally or for individual clients or for a bride and groom or family, whatever it is, how do we create these images that really matter? This is a portrait of one of my best friends. And I wanted to open with this image because this image really matters to me. I think it's a cool photograph, but more importantly, he matters to me. And so therefore, I'm bringing value, or it's bringing value, I'm bringing value into it. The more we care about the people we photograph, the greater the chance other people will care about them as well. So one of the first steps is to really think about, what do you value? What do you love? Who matters to you in the world? And then next, we need to combine that with this idea that photography isn't what it used to be. A number of years ago, I taught at a photography school called the Brooks Institute. And at the time, and for decades and decades, it was the world's leading school, photography school. And one of the promises of that school was technical expertise. In other words, if you went to Brooks, you could technically execute and create strong photographs. Back in the era of film, technical expertise was king. That was everything. But then as photography evolved, you also needed more than technique. Technique wasn't enough. You needed to be creative. You needed to figure out how to have social connection. You needed to almost explore how photography is now universal, ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And so one of the things that I think could be fun to do, and Fred, if you're up for it, I'll have you back on, is to really just start to ask this question: how has photography changed from what it was to what it is today? And Fred, if you're up for it, I can stop sharing and we can go back on here and let's talk about this. And also, if anyone else wants to chime in, add how they feel it's changed. And I'm going to first go with like a big period. Let's say 20 years ago or 30 years ago. How has photography changed? And I'm gonna say a few things, but then I'm gonna ask you. One is, 20 years ago, magazine covers really mattered. So if I were to say I photographed a magazine cover, people would be like, whoa. Now we don't really photograph magazine covers because there aren't really many magazines. That's changed, right? Another thing that's changed is, 20 years ago, you might say, like, I would really love to go and work for Nat Geo and travel the world and tell these powerful stories and be sent on an assignment for a month at a time. Those assignments don't exist anymore. And the pool of photographers, let's say with Nat Geo, and again, I'm just playing with photography in big, broad, you know, big, broad ways, but there were a lot of Nat Geo photographers. Now there are very few, and those assignments are even fewer. And the circulation of one of the greatest publications ever is much, much lower. So the photography that we create, the output of where it used to go, is what I'm trying to get at, has shifted dramatically.
Mhm.
Many of our photographs, one thing we might say, are never printed. I'll photograph for a client. I'll get paid really well. Not a single print ever is made. It's all digital delivery. And that's a real big shift. It's a shift on how we create, what we create, the technical requirements. And again, I'll pause here in just a second. But back in the day, it used to be like you had to have detail on your blacks because it wouldn't print well. And so there are a lot of Photoshop courses on making sure you have good detail in your blacks. Well, in digital distribution, I would argue it doesn't matter. A deep, pure black digitally on an iPhone looks kind of cool. It doesn't look like it's falling apart, right? But if it was on a billboard and it was falling apart, or a magazine cover and it was falling apart, that actually really mattered. Okay, so back to you. Let me kind of ping pong here. What's changed in the last 20 years from your perspective?
One thing, back to you bringing up magazine covers.
Yeah,
What for magazine covers, like model shoots, photo spreads of that variety,
yeah,
the the focus on the subject has changed from introducing you to a new face, a new form of beauty, a different uh, model, something new coming up in the world, to like a more familiar celebrity, right? So
yes,
yeah, at a
thousand
certain
percent.
point, right?
Keep going with this. Yes.
There was a certain point where magazine covers were dominated by the supermodel, and then the
Yeah.
interior and the advertising on the inside of those fashion magazines were up and coming models, and the features were models. But now, not now, but maybe I'd say probably a decade or more ago,
Yep. Yep. You're
there's
right
been a
on.
big shift to just presenting what people are already familiar with. Like, no, you've seen them in a movie. Now look at the still picture of them. And
Yes.
I feel I feel like we're losing out a lot because no one's being introduced to new faces. No one's seeing
Mm.
something that they haven't already seen before 1,000 times. And so I feel like that has been a big shift, as far as like the media aspect of photography. It's not an introduction anymore. It's here's more of what you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're adding amazing things. One, you're kind of added a qualitative evaluation of how it's changed, which is important. Like first, it's kind of like objectively what's changed, and then how do we feel about that? And you did both, which is great. And you're exactly right. We don't there aren't supermodels anymore. I mean, there are models that are great, but there was an era where there were like 10 supermodels or something, you know.
Yeah.
And then to your point, then the actors and actresses and athletes, they started to become models as well. And then there was this blending. And 20 years ago, it was like People magazine, and that was different than, say, Cosmopolitan magazine. Celebrities were not in, they were in one, not in the other. And then that shifted. And then obviously with social media, rather than having to go to People magazine, we now go to their Instagram feed to
Hmm.
follow Matt Damon and we see what he's up to or whatever celebrity, right? And so the portraiture we're seeing of, I'll just go with Matt Damon. I don't even know if he has an Instagram channel, but I think he's a cool guy. I imagine if he does have one or other celebrity, the portraiture we're going to see is not A plus Annie Leibovitz studio portraiture. He would never post that on his Instagram feed unless he was like, "Oh, I did this shoot." He would post maybe a hero shot and then one with him like spilling something on his shirt. So there's this idea of like, yes, like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, it was very polished, very put together. We had to go to the sources that were these bigger things. Now we go to individuals and we want something a little more real, right?
We're just giving right now. We're giving more and more up on what's behind the curtain. Like
Yes,
not
yes.
not the Wizard of Oz, but the 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 little failed scientists that put together the hologram for you.
Yes. Yes. No, you're right. You're right. And even thinking through how, we call it social media, but it really isn't social media anymore. And what I mean by that is, and kind of just, I'm getting to the evolution, but like social media was like our social network. Think of Facebook. It started as like who's in your network, Instagram, who's in your network. Now I like the idea that people are talking about it social interest media. In other words, yes, it's social. We could be connected, but it's also if I really like wood carving, I'm going to follow that feed. If I really like yoga, that interest, I'm not necessarily, I don't know that wood carver or that yoga teacher, but my social media feed is full of those things and golden retrievers because I have those as well. What started out as a group of friends expanded to a larger group of connections has now then kind of splintered into interest and then AI and algorithms obviously delivering us content we want. And so there's a whole like different way we're interacting with these things. And with that, and maybe I'll jump back to my slides, I think it's helpful in the context of portraiture to just admit photography has changed.
Yeah.
you know, and just to play with it a little bit and then to ask ourselves, okay, so what and what do we do? So how about if I jump back to my slides and we'll go back to sharing here and um, one of the ways in this current change, I think one of the things we need to ask is why does portraiture matter? So I asked ChatGPT because I thought here we are in the age of AI, and I want to know what ChatGPT had to say about why portraiture matters. And it says portraiture matters because it transcends the surface, ventures into the soul. Oh, I also said write this in the style of Chris Orwig. So I'm asking ChatGPT to tell me why does it matter and kind of impersonate me. Good portrait isn't about a face, it's about their essence. It's about listening. It's about seeing with the heart, holding space for another person to simply be. In a world consumed by noise and speed, portraiture invites us to slow down and notice. It's about connection, the kind that lingers, the kind that says, I see you. And I don't know about you, but I love that paragraph. Why does it matter? It transcends, it helps us to pause, it helps us to connect. Then ChatGPT goes on. When we create or encounter a portrait, we're engaging in a dialogue with vulnerability and authenticity. So, in the age of AI generated headshots, the difference with a portrait is there is this mixture of authenticity, this veracity, this vulnerability. These images become a mirror, not only reflecting who the subject is, but also us. It's about the moment that happens between us. And then just jumping to the end here, in the end, portraiture matters because people matter. And I love that. And I love that idea. And I think whenever I'm trying to create a portrait, I'm trying to create something, and whether in this case in the studio, that creates a sense of thoughtfulness, a sense of connection, a sense of peace. I love this idea that in portraiture, you want to look at someone so closely that you begin to see yourself. You begin to see the connection, even with people, different age, different gender, different interests. You want to capture the essence of who they are, what they care about. This is a friend, family friend's daughter and her dog. And I love this portrait. I love how they're melting into each other. And their dog passed, and this young woman got her dog's name tattooed on her arm. You can tell her dog's really important to her. And so, in this pursuit, whether it's a yoga teacher at the beach, a bride up in the mountains, a baseball player in his van, you're starting to see that, at least for me, I've taken some time to really explore and think about what matters, holding space, being seen, seeing someone else, the sense of authenticity, this veracity with people who are legends, who founded Patagonia on the right, founded O'Neill wetsuits on the left. Also true with models and influencers and people who I'm photographing when I'm doing commercial work. So for me, the blending of commercial and personal are very close. Those are very close neighbors. So I want to do commercial work of actresses and famous surfers in a way where I feel something, where I think where we're creating something that AI just can't get. And above and beyond that, where I'm having experiences that add value. Like this young man on the left, an actor, he died in a motorcycle accident, and this was one of the last shoots he did. And to have these photos that keep his spirit alive, and for me, every time I see it, I remember him, and I remember his depth, his strength, his personality. So there's a gift that the photographer receives, and one of the ways that we get that gift is through bringing meaning to this craft. This craft is created by these powerful cameras, by these amazing lenses, by an understanding of light. But more than that, I think it's grounded in this deep sense of humanity. So when we're photographing, like this was a test shoot in both cases, it's nothing but like a test. A test can be meaningful if you bring meaning to it. It also is if you're photographing family members, my daughter on the left, mom on the right, other friends, families, kids, kid running on the beach. And one of the ways I think we can start to create portraits that matter is to keep in mind that in all of this, we are involved in this deep and interesting process. And I'm talking about AI because this is really important in our current day and age, and it's really something that's happening and growing and evolving very, very quickly. And AI is a generative process, right? Where we create prompts or we use assets and we build something from those. Where portraiture is a little bit more of exploratory process, where you kind of take one step and you photograph this, in this case, the actor in front of the theater, and then we walk out inside in front and the other part of the theater, and there's this beautiful afternoon light. And then we went inside the theater and set up a light and did some work up close. And then I asked him to sit in the theater seats. And I'm kind of searching for the moment. And what we're doing in portraiture a lot of times is we're not nailing it on the first photograph. Rather, we take something and then we keep trying and exploring and getting to know someone in a unique way. So, how that then relates to creating portraits that matter, I would argue that one of the first steps is just embracing the sense of process. This isn't a quick fix. This isn't uh, magically easy. It's going to take time. It's a practice. It's a process. And I've shown these images before, but just kind of illustrating this idea that the first photograph is often, for me, not very good. But then I work and I trust the process. And by trusting the process, it helps me get somewhere. And so one of the first ideas I want to just kind of throw out there is that portraiture, to get good at this, to create something that matters, you have to embrace the sense of process. So when you buy the new camera and the new lens and you take your first 5 pictures or first 500 and they're not very good, that's okay. Those are all small steps that are leading you to creating something that matters. The second thing is to think about portraiture in a much bigger historic context than we've been talking about so far. So this is a sculpture from 2000 BC. Here's a painting from 79 AD, and then we have an early photograph from 1850. And also, how awesome is that photograph? I just like, I love that photograph. I think that is just so great. And the reason why I want to kind of put this in a bigger context is to create portraits that matter. We have to realize that we're stepping into a tradition that has literally been going on for thousands of years. And of course, I could have gone back further. We could have looked at cave paintings, but the point of it is that there's a deep, deep tradition of creating portraits. And as we look at what happened thousands of years ago, and then as it became more modern, and as we're moving into the future, we obviously are starting to use different tools. And the thing to keep in mind with portraiture and photography changing is it's always been changing. The craft of portraiture has changed, the materials, the means throughout the history of portraiture. The history of photographic portraiture, without a doubt, has been changing. And so it's not whether or not is this changing or not. Yes, it's changing, but then how do we honor the past and make sense to the present? And so sometimes people will say things like photography is dead, or even is traditional portraiture dead. And I asked, ChatGPT to create a graphic, and sometimes the graphics it creates are just so goofy. But I think it's helpful to see those and to see the goofiness that we're in AI right now, and to know 10 years from now it won't be quite so goofy, perhaps. But I think that the answer is traditional portraiture dead? I think the answer is yes. If we look at, let's say, traditional portraiture, maybe back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe like Avedon's work, or other great portrait photographers, like the way of creating portraits like that has shifted because we're in a new decade, we're in a new era, and there are certain kinds of portraiture that have changed. And so one of the questions, of course, is then, well, how do we future-proof our own portraits? How do we bring meaning to this? And I think one of the ways we can do that is by photographing things that matter to us. This is a portrait of Jack O'Neill. Here's the close-up of him, but here he is on his porch, and then there's a guy surfing in the background. And when I was 13, the first wave I ever caught was right in front of his house, right there. So this image captures in so many ways someone who I admire, who I would wear the wetsuits he invented and created, and I also surfed first my first point of surfing in front of his house. So it's like this whole thing matters to me. Does it matter to other people? Well, certain people. Jack has passed on, so this is a great, important historic image of him at his house, hanging over the ocean in Santa Cruz. Um, but other people, maybe someone who doesn't like surfing, doesn't like ocean, doesn't like California, it doesn't really mean anything at all. But what we have to do is say, okay, who cares about that? This matters to me. And by creating things that matter in a way, we're future proofing our work because the care that we have that goes into the photographs suddenly shows up in the images. Another way we can do that is by capturing things that are these moments. This is engagement photo shoot on the beach of a couple of friends. And this is going to matter to them. It matters to me. AI cannot replicate this. No one would want an AI generated photograph of their engagement. At least I don't think. Same thing when photographing a bride and up in the mountains. We want these things to be real. We want these things to tell our stories that we were there. This person was there. This moment happened. And so returning to this veracity and really expanding and building upon what we know and maybe making that or taking that further. So I'm going to go to this topic of headshots. And this is going to be kind of a bold statement, but I believe the era of the headshot's over. And the reason is that there are so many tools now which allow us to build really good headshots. If they're this good today, 10 years from now, they're going to be even better. But if we expand and build upon the idea of a headshot, we can still add value in that space if we let go of the traditional concept. So here are a couple of headshots that I'll use. The one on the left was captured by my 11-year-old daughter. I set up some lights. She had her camera and she pushed the button that tracks the auto eye focus with all the Sony stuff. And so she was able to create this portrait of me. I didn't go to a headshot photographer. I didn't pay a ton of money. The one on the right, this was a friend. We were hanging out in San Francisco and he was laughing. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to capture a photo of you in the way you always like it with backlight because that's what you do in your photos." And I was like, "Great." And it's a great quote headshot, right? So I'm expanding beyond traditional headshot. These are also headshots. I also use these when I speak and teach. These are me out in the elements. Now, why the heck am I showing photographs of myself? Because I want to kind of expand what we know. There are times when people need photographs of themselves. They need them to tell their stories. They need them for commercial purposes. That's typically what a headshot is. A real estate agent needs a headshot. An actor needs a headshot so they can gain clients and money, and it's commerce, right? And in this space of commerce, the stories have expanded. So if we can, rather than seeing headshot as this narrow little thing, which is like one lighting setup and one certain kind of look, to a larger story, which taps into this bigger aspect of portraiture, we can, in a lot of ways, I think, start to tell these stories of people in new ways. Another way is to zoom out. And what I mean by zooming out is thinking, like just stepping out of our own world for a second, and like we've been doing in this talk today, and looking at old photographs. This is a photograph of my mom and dad on their wedding day. We still need these photographs. So even though this one was captured decades and decades ago, it could be recaptured today with a bride and groom, this afternoon at their wedding. It probably will be, right? Same photograph. And the way the photographs have evolved is, yes, there are some traditional things that have lasted. Then there are also some in the moment things. Like we were celebrating my mom and dad's anniversary. And so I snapped a photo of them in front of our house. And we can look historically too at things like family photographs. These are some family photographs of me and my family and how we used to, my dad would set up on a tripod, or we'd go to Olin Mills and they would capture a photograph. And now on the left, I set a camera or maybe my iPhone, I think, on a trash can and had auto timer, or I'm creating a selfie. So there's certain kind of images that still matter. Yeah, portraiture has changed, yes, but there's still ways to capture and create things. For example, at weddings, group photography and portraiture still really, really matters. Here I am, the bride with all my friends. The bride needs that story. She needs to tell that. And I'm not saying me, I'm not the bride, but I'm speaking for the bride. She needs that image. They all need the image. Or maybe a grandma, and all her family's gathering together over the holidays, and they need a photograph to capture all the kids and all everyone together. These kind of images matter a lot. And I would say for my family too. Like in my family, I will pay someone to photograph my family and kids because it's something that I still value. It still really matters to me. I'm never going to use AI for family photographs. There are other moments commercially that matter. This in this case with products and with two models enjoying the products. And this is another commercial use. This is a meditation teacher, and she needs images to help tell her story for the retreats that she's leading. And looking at how we can really think about portraiture in this big and broad ways that can be these quiet moments, they can be these moments of a painter, of a model, of strangers, of a homeless person, or a friend about to go on a biking journey, walking around New York City. I've already talked about this idea of family and kids, your own kids, actresses, and more. So let me pause right there and exit out of this and stop sharing for a moment. And Fred, if you're able to come back on, and let me just ask you this question with all of that I just went through. What comes up for you? What does it make you think of? What questions do you have? Or what do you agree with? What do you disagree with?
Oh, a lot, but let's start with one.
Okay, yes, that was like six questions.
Yeah. The bringing up AI and why you wouldn't use it for the engagement for your family.
Yeah,
Um, it it's that argument of authenticity
right.
and whether or not you're actually capturing something or you're just creating a facade or asking something to create a facade for you and pushing it out.
Yes.
But as you were showing the different portraits of you, it was Chris, the first picture, it was Chris the father,
Mm,
and then the second picture, Chris the friend, and as you went along, Chris the surfer, Chris the photographer. You know, so having a headshot in that classic sense of you just want that straightforward single pose, three light,
yeah.
just to be like, this is what the person looks like, so you don't forget what they look like, and it's on their business card. That's that can be that that's important because
It
it's
is. Yeah.
this person the executive or this person the
Yes.
real estate agent, but it's also that connection that you're making. You're also showing it's Chris. He's funny, or Chris. He has a long history behind him, uh, or the picture of your parents, your father and your mother, the couple, not just them individually, but them as a unit.
Yes.
So I think portraiture is important and will always be important because it's pulling the authentic self,
Mm,
no matter what at what point in their life or what career or hobby or thing that they're interested in or characteristic. You each portrait is showing an authentic version of that person.
I love that. And I love just to reflect back what you were saying. And when you talked about the photos of me, there's the father, the friend, the photographer, and we could go on the surfer, the cyclist, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And that one of the ways that photography has changed is we want more. That we realize we can't typecast someone. Oh, there's uh you know, tall basketball player guy or something. It's like that's not enough. Or
Mhm.
or like or handsome uh A-list actor. You're like, it's kind of like, oh, really? Like that's all you're going to show me in the photograph? Back in the day, if you showed that, that would be amazing. We would be like, yes, that we can get behind the singularity of that story. What we've realized now when it comes to storytelling, and if you look at, the history of stories and movies, is that we want now the backstory and the other stories and the stories from different points of view. So, for example, uh, my wife and daughter went to see the movie Wicked, which I haven't seen yet, but I'd love to see it. But it's like telling the story of the Wicked Witch of the, and sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but it, and do you know the story, the Wicked Witch of the East or the West? I can't remember.
Wes, I think.
The West. But anyway, one of the
Yeah.
witches, we kind of learn about her story versus another point of view. And we now want these backstories, these different perspectives.
Mhm.
And so the singular headshot, which only tells a small slice, at least in my opinion, isn't quite enough. Same thing in a wedding photograph. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, if you just had like really nice polished wedding photographs, great. Now we want the one where the kid spilled punch all over his white shirt or the groom fell into the fountain or just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm making it up. But you know what I mean? We want
Authentic,
some,
clumsy self.
yeah, authentic, clumsy, real, fun stuff or like um we want these fun real moments. And so anyway, so in portraiture, what we're trying to do is get to authenticity, which you and I know we're more than our name, we're more than our title, we're more than our job, we're more than one of our interests, we're many things. And then how do we tell the many? With the images. And sometimes that means using different kinds of gear, right? So there's certain times I will photograph with my iPhone because I can tell a certain story. Other times I'll photograph with one of my big cameras. And being willing to be flexible with the way we tell stories can help to make the portraits matter. Because what I've found, at least, is and this is kind of funny, and it's taken me a while to learn this, but if I deliver A plus photos to my client, they're kind of disappointed and they're not very usable. If I have a set of A plus, A level photos, B, and then C, what I mean by this is, let's say the C are more like lifestyle, quirky, in between moments, not real well posed. B might be more like cool, lifestyle, well, kind of person looks great. But I need these three categories of images so that the client can then use them because on social media, if we were to use an A plus photo day after day after day after day, the audience would just tune, tune
Yeah,
out.
I've seen this shot before.
I've seen this. Yes, I've seen this. And this story is not, I can't relate to it, right? We want to relate somehow to it.
So you're bringing up clients, you're bringing up headshots, and
Yeah,
the photos that you're delivering. We have a comment in the chat
sure.
from Donna.
Yeah.
Making a living as a full-time photographer specializing in headshots and say family portraiture is now impossible. No one wants to pay what you are worth. Do you have like a
Yeah.
response to that?
Yeah. My response is I agree. And the thing is, I think some people, we hold these things so we're so, uh, and again, I'm playing with headshots here just for fun because it's something I do. Um, But I think if I had to, because I coach a lot of people, if someone's like, hey, I'm going to quit my full-time job where I'm making six figures and I'm going to start up being a headshot photographer so I can provide for my family, pay for my kids' education, pay for, do you think in 10 years from now I'll be able to do that? I would say, no, you can't. That's too limited. But what I think we can do is say yes and. What I mean by that is those theater photos I started off with, the guy said, will you photograph some headshots for me? I was like, sure. I did some, which I didn't show, but are like the clean classic headshot. But I also did some of him in the theater. I didn't show other ones like of him outside in sun, warm sunshine, laughing. I did my three boxes. And in that case, I can survive as a photographer, if that makes sense. But if I think to your was just like headshots and family, um, people aren't wanting, no one wants to pay what you're worth, which is a interesting comment. And hopefully I can, hopefully you'll receive this, Donna. Um, I don't think it's about our worth. I think it's just about the way the market has shifted. And what I mean by that is my kids' school used to bring me in to do photographs of the school. And now someone just uses an iPhone and captures the kids, you know, when it's, they did some, I don't know, some project. Before that, they used to, like before my era, they would pay a photographer to come to the school. Then now I just did it for free. And now the vice principal just does it with his iPhone. Does that make sense? So it's not that my worth is less, but the photograph, there isn't a need for it to hire someone. Why would you pay someone $1,000 if you could just do it with your iPhone, right? And so I think it's more about looking at the market and how the market is defining the need and value of the photograph. Does that make sense, Fred, or not?
No, yeah, totally.
And Donna, do you have a follow-up question too? Go ahead.
I think it rolls into what you said earlier about the tiers of the images that you shoot,
Yeah.
right? It's yet you are, of course, looking for the A shots for the that family photo that
Mhm.
everybody has, that
Yeah.
headshot that everybody has. But to offer your B and C, and I hate to say it this way, but as a service, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
yeah, if your B and C are part of your package,
Right.
then maybe you can find they'll find more value in it, and hence you can charge what you feel you're worth because you put forth the effort to do more than just the A.
Yes. Yes. And the question of maybe of worth and business and all those kind of things too, I think I'm wrestling with this a little bit because uh when I teach and coach people, I often say you have to create photographs that are needed. And I often will tell this story. This one guy photographs these mountain bikers, and he's an amazing photographer, but they're all his friends mountain biking. And his friends will never need those photographs. Like they like them, but they're not going to say, I'll pay you $5,000 for that one photograph you took of me. Like you would never do that. But if that person starts photographing sponsored mountain bikers, influencer mountain bikers, there is a need for those photographs. And so then they share them on social, the brand share them on social, then the brands hire him to do it. And then now he is getting paid $5,000. And it's not that he's like, my friends can't give me what I'm worth. It's a little bit of a wrong posture. It's more like there's just no need there, but brands need it. And so therefore brands are able to pay it. So it's not because sometimes I think what happens with photography is as prices change, and this is in the history of photography, because like I said, I taught at Brooks. When digital came on, I was there and people were like, no, they're not going to pay us what we're worth because they don't understand what we do. And it's like, well, digital changed the whole financial relationship. And then social media changed the whole thing. And then it just continually changes if that makes sense. And so it's almost maybe what am I trying to say? What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say, and I'm trying to encourage, hopefully this is encouraging versus depressing, is and maybe I'll play with a surfing analogy, or let me, but maybe what I'm trying to say is adapt or die. That's what it is. Like photography has changed. Like think of the photographers who, you know, who I don't know, were shooting a particular type, daguerreotype or something, or glass plate, or 4x5 or 8x10. But then once that era ended, you had to evolve into the new era. Otherwise, you couldn't survive. and they couldn't pay you what you're worth because your worth was anchored in the past versus the present. Maybe the best analogy is like someone who sells landlines and payphones. You know, they're like, these things are great. The quality is so much better than cell phones. They never, you know, calls never dropped. You know, there's never any static. And it's like, yes, but the era of the landline and the payphone's over. Case closed. So
Which
how
I
do
mean,
we, yeah,
the surfer analogy, it's finding and chasing the wave, right?
yes,
It's not just sitting there waiting for something to come to you. I mean, occasionally, yes, one might pass you by. It might be a small one that gets you from
yes,
point A to point A and a half. But
right,
if you want to get to point C and D, you
yes.
gotta go out and search for it.
Gotta
It's
hustle.
yeah.
Yeah. And you have to, and the sad thing is you have to mourn and let go of what photography was and embrace what it is. And I think that's a real hurdle for people because it's like, well, back in the heyday, and I feel like that's almost like those people, well, back in high school, I was a really good football player. And it's like, great, but now you're an accountant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you take all that you learned from athletics and apply it to this new context? And how do you stay fit as or whatever? But to your point, Donna, the world has changed. So let me jump back to my slides, and we'll keep talking and we'll keep fielding some questions, because hopefully this is kind of getting us somewhere, and leading in. And Fred, can you see my images here so
Yes,
far?
indeed.
Okay, so one of the things we can do is really begin to ask ourselves what matters to us. So, if we want to create photo portraits that matter in this context that's ever changing, we have to really staunchly, say, okay, well, what is it? I want this to be an expression of who I am and how I see the world. What matters to me are things that are warm, that are simple, that are soulful, that are natural, that are timeless, that are beautiful, that are authentic, that are down to earth. And so, what matters to me are these qualities, these values. This is what I'm going to bring to portraiture. And if you look at my portraiture and if you look at why I'm hired, it's because of these things. This doesn't happen on accident. This happens because I've intentionally thought about this. I think about kind of these big picture ideas and then I get really specific. And we can do this with different types of photography too. We can say that we could photograph journalistically, or we could do fine artwork. We could photograph in a way that's glamorous. We could photograph kids, family, strangers. And what we have to then do is sort of say, like, well, what is it that we really want to focus on? Athletes, artists, actors, celebrities, strangers, poets, advertising, editorial. And then descriptively, I want to do this in a way where if I'm photographing an actress, I want it to be authentic and soulful and calm and quiet and timeless. And this gets to my last slide, which is, okay, let's figure this out, which I'll stop sharing my slides here, is the thing that the thing that we can do if we want to create portraits that matter is start to ask ourselves, well, what matters to us and why? And how can I bring that into the current context? Because the reality is that it's not enough to be technically good. Like back in the day, the Brooks students, they could graduate, people would hire them because they were technically good. They could deliver what they needed to. And then Donna, maybe even the case like back in the day, you could do headshots and family photographs. You could provide for your family. I mean, that was enough, but it's not enough anymore. And what we have to do is now explore how do we do these things, but do them in a way, some people will say kind of a niche. Other people might say have your own style. What I'm trying to say is do them in a way that matters to us, that really reflects and resonates with who we are and has these qualitative values. And then when we bring those qualitative values in, then commercially, people come to us for those things because those qualities matter to them. So one of my biggest commercial jobs last year, someone said they want authentic and meaningful, warm portraits of this big company and all the staff in the company in different ways and all the different roles. And so they brought me in and I did what I do and it worked. And it was meaningful to me. It was meaningful to them. So Fred, if you want to come back on, we can kind of, get to our wrapping point here because we're near the end. Um, and one of the things I just want to say, and then if there are any other questions, feel free to bring them in, is that part of what I want to do here is bring a new intention to the craft of portraiture. And that intention is awareness with the history of portraiture. We're in this big, huge thing. Portraits really, really matter. They will always matter because at the end of the day, it's about people. And yet, what we have to do within that huge historic context is explore today, what matters now, and where is all of this going, and how can we, I love your analogy, catch and ride that wave. What are your thoughts, reflections, or any other questions?
Well, let me get to a question from Elizabeth.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for watching. I just want to make sure that we get to what you need. Um, she often hears that a picture should tell a story.
Hmm.
Can you do that with portraits? I definitely know
Yeah.
the first word of your answer is going to be yes.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's the rest of the answer? Yes, portraits can tell a story.
Yeah, I think a lot about this idea of the difference between plot and narrative. Maybe it was E.M. Forrester who said it, that plot is king died, queen died. Narrative is queen died, king died of heartbreak. And so it's two words that suddenly tell a story and has a little more meaning. And so I think the storytelling in portraiture that I like, that matters to me, is very subtle. I know there are other portrait photographers that build really big sets and they have props and wardrobe that helps tell the story. Still others maybe like journalistically telling the story, like something's happening and they catch that moment of that portrait of the kid on the street just sitting there with the ice cream cone or something fun like that. So part of it is asking yourself what kind of stories matter to you. What I found is journalistic stories leave me a little bit empty because I'm not involved. The journalist is an observer, not a participant. What I find is with the stories where there are lots of props, and it's kind of like the queen died, and then the king, he went on a journey, and then his horse died, and then his castle burned down, and then there was a dragon, and then he was sad, and then he had a heartbreak, and then he died. Like those for me, you can even tell by the way I'm telling the story. I'm like blah, 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 blah. So for me, having a lot of prop set is like blah, 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 blah. Other people, that lights the fire in their soul and they're amazing at it. And there's like some of the world's best portrait photographers tell stories in that way. So, of course, and it's an amazing question. Yes, we can tell the stories. Um, what the stories I'm looking for is subtle, and it's even kind of it's the inner landscape of who someone is. I love the idea that Orson Welles said, by the age 50, you have the face you deserve. In other words, you can be in your 20s and kind of hide your anger and it won't show up on your face. By the time you're 50, all those years of anger, it shows up. And I like the stories that are told by our skin, by our posture, by how we carry ourselves, how we breathe, how we reflect. So I'm looking for more of those subtle, what I would call more internal, soulful stories, and something that adds value to the sitter, so they see themselves and are like, "Ooh, like that really captures where I'm at, what I'm going through in this life, without blah blah blah, dragon, castle, all the things. Also without like, oh, you just like, wow, that's kind of how neat. It's like Bresson, you like captured the moment as it was happening." Those kind of storytelling I'm not very good at. I don't really like. They don't really matter to me as much, but the other ones do. So it's not about me. Obviously, it's about all of us finding out what kind of storytelling we like and then bringing that to portraiture. And when you bring that into it, you can almost infuse your portraits with those qualities. And that's like magic. And that matters. And that creates stuff that lasts in whatever it is. So storytelling is the crux. And whoever asked that question, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I mean, the most empty portraits have no story at all, right? You're just like, huh, nothing there, vacant,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay,
Even the portraits that tell a story that end with the words of heartbreak,
hmm,
they're
right.
they create they create a different mood. They create emotion for the person looking at the picture. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Heartbreak or, um, I like the idea that like, um, good stories can make us feel multiple emotions at once. So you can see someone maybe who's very beautiful, but they're sad. And so you're kind of in awe of beauty, but you also feel their sadness. Or you can see someone who's confident, but also scared. And if you can capture a portrait with those two things, or like confident and searching, maybe they're like, they're really bold, but they're not, they haven't arrived. It's like, ooh, those portraits are like the
Yeah.
best of all time, right?
I mean, portraits of older people of our heroes
Right.
in their older age, weathered, but like not conceited, but prideful of the things that they've gone through and that
Yes.
they've accomplished. Like mixing
Yes.
those kind of things together to
Yeah.
create
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Like for me, I love photographing old people, in particular because I think there's an art to growing old, which is perhaps one of the greatest arts of all. Like, how do we do it? And there's some people who do it so well. Sometimes you spend time with someone older, parent, grandparent, whatever, and you're like, wow, like I want to learn how to do that. And there's other people who do the opposite too. And those portraits can help you. I think of them as negative inspiration. There's a lot of people I've photographed I'll never share the photos of because there's a negative energy in the images, and I can feel their anger, or I can feel just qualities that you saw my qualities: warm, although they're authentic. But I can see maybe it's someone's like angry, shallow, and self-absorbed. I'm not going to share that. It's not in my portfolio, but it's going to negatively inspire me to not be negative, shallow, and self-absorbed
Mm.
because I kind of witnessed that and I'm like, ooh, I don't want to be that. I want to be something else.
Yeah, and also you don't want your subject reflecting that back into the camera.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
But it happens, sometimes
Yeah.
it's there. And that's the fun thing as photographers, um, we get to decide what we share. And that it's another part of it, which goes back to what matters to us, and maybe just to make this more like practical. One time I had a camera, of course, I was walking around and this baby bird had fallen out of a bird nest and landed on the ground and died. And for whatever reason, I took a picture of it. And it was so sad. It was just like the saddest thing. I don't know why. It just broke my heart. And I thought, why did I take a picture of that? And what am I going to do with that picture? And for me, I mean, I think someone else could maybe do that. Like they could photograph birds that have been caught in oil slick, or birds that swallow plastic because of all the plastic problem. But and I admire photography that tells those kind of stories, but that's not the stories I'm going to tell. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's not the energy I want to ruminate on. That's not the energy I want to bring out into the world. I don't want to catch people off guard with that. The stuff that I need most is warmth, kindness, authenticity, all the stuff. Um, and again, it's not a matter of saying if someone likes mine and or whatever. It's about creating your own. All of us need to create our own. And then if we can, those photos will matter versus those photos having just like a shock impact, meaning beautiful person, wow thing, or exciting, like that doesn't last. That doesn't matter anymore. That's not enough anymore. Like if you were to go photograph a celebrity and you just were like, oh, wow, hero, everyone would be like, okay, cool. There are no magazine covers for that photo to even go on.
Oh,
Um, it's kind of neat, but then what else? It's like, oh, then we like hang out and ate tacos. And it's like, well, do you have a photo of him eating tacos? You should, right?
yeah.
Because that then adds another interesting element. Um,
Yeah, it's what's the assignment, right?
mm,
You're doing the mountain biking magazine or you're doing a fashion spread. It's you're shooting according to what is being asked of you.
hmm.
A
And
tier.
And
A
maybe
tier,
what
and
they do,
then B and
what
C,
they
right?
you don't know what's being asked of. They don't even know what to ask for. Because what clients will often do is ask for um, they'll ask for what they think they need, but they need other stuff too. And I would even say like individuals, let's say you go photograph um, a real estate agent or author and they need a photo for the cover of their book. You photograph the book cover photo, pretty simple, clean, maybe outside in nature. But then you also have them with their dog and you have them sitting on a couch and you have these other photos and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, you just gave me this like whole bucket of content that I can use so that when I say like, new books out, I can do the headshot one. I can do the one with my dog, and they'll write some funny caption like, "This is my dog Charlie. He chewed through 2 copies of my newest book. You should buy one too." And
Yeah.
then that probably will get more traction than the headshot.
Yeah.
But
Your
they
tier
don't.
system in
Yeah, the
action.
tiers. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And ABC might not be the right way because that makes it sound like C is less valuable. It might not, maybe it's more like one, two, three, because three sometimes is more valuable than one, but you have to deliver all. And then you also may deliver, I mean, a lot of, sometimes I'll use a drone or sometimes I'll use a GoPro. Sometimes someone's out in the ocean. I jump out with my GoPro and I capture something. So that's one, two, three, and then four, do portrait photographers use GoPros? I would say yes.
Yeah.
Can you tell stories with GoPros? Yes. Is it the only thing I use? No. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I had a just a weird thing.
Yeah.
I had a friend in high school who we always thought was kind of he was a little bit of a doofus, but
Yes. Yes.
lovable, great guy.
Yeah.
But the way he would explain like what we were doing that night,
Yeah.
it would be first we're gonna meet up at Fred's house. And
Okay.
then first we're gonna go we're gonna go see a movie. And then after that, first we're gonna, have a good time. And you're just like, wait, but that's you're it's starting to make sense that A,
Yes.
B, and C, it's first, and then first.
Yes. 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 And perhaps another way, I mean, analogies fall apart, but there's another way I think about it is like, let's say, Fred, you come to Santa Barbara and I'm like, "Hey, why don't you come over for dinner?" There's the first, we're gonna have some appetizers, right? And then also I'm gonna get some fresh fish from the local market. We'll have that. And then maybe we're gonna have some beverages and maybe we're gonna have a campfire and we're gonna roast s'mores over the campfire. The question would be, sometimes people are like, "Well, what's most important, the s'more or the appetizer?" And I'm like, it's all important.
Yeah,
You know what I
all
mean? It's the
important.
whole experience. And as portrait photographers, we're creating these experiences. We're capturing essence of things. And what we think is essence traditionally has shifted. And that's maybe what I'm really trying to say and to get people
Hmm.
excited about is to realize this is shifted. This doesn't mean a door has closed. Yes, it's closed, but also 6 doors have opened. And the storytelling question is so key with that. There's so many fun ways to tell these stories, and it doesn't mean that your hands are tied or you're limited. It means you can do this and more. And it doesn't mean you always do more. It's not like you have like 13 appetizers, or something.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like a little quick iPhone shot that you text them later that day, and the client is so grateful for that photograph. Whereas the other ones, I got to import them into Lightroom. I got to process them. I got to back them up. I got to create a gallery. That's a week later. But that photo maybe I sent that day that they share can make all the difference in the world. So again, it's the tier system and being mindful of that and being mindful of being a photographer. It's this great gift where you can be, it requires a lot of ingenuity, creativity,
No.
and exploration.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, do you have anything? I mean, I think you just drove at the main point of what you were trying to express today, this part of the series at least.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to uh,
Hmm.
bring up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
people
yeah.
watching?
Maybe. Thank you. And thank you for that question. I think just to What I'm trying to do is you can tell Fred and everyone listening that I'm wrestling with this myself, and that's a good thing. And that what we want to do is wrestle with what was portraiture, what is portraiture, what was photography, what is photography, and that it's not a clear path, and there's some mystery involved in it. Photography 20 years ago was pretty clear. Here's how you set up the lights, here's what you do, here's the backdrops, boom, done, executed, move on. Now it's much more of an adventure. And embracing that adventure spirit can help us create content that matters, that can transcend our own lifetime. It can be a gift to others, and that this pursuit is worthwhile. And what we'll do next is get a little more practical. So if you're like, okay, portrait, kind of interesting, we're talking about this, I want to learn how to actually do this, come back for the next number of webinars where we will build upon this and we'll look at, okay, how do we practically do this?
Mhm.
So I think that's really, the tie-in to what's coming next.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Sony, thank you again for getting us started in 2025 with Chris, and can't wait to see the rest of the series. Chris, thanks. We'll have you on again soon, end of this month,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Awesome.
exactly.
And alrighty, well, thank you, and thanks to everybody watching. If you like this and want some more of Chris or any other educational content we produce, come and check out the BH Event Space YouTube channel. With that, Chris, again, I think maybe the fifth time I'll thank you, but
Yeah.
always love having you here.
And awesome to hang out, Fred. So fun to talk about all this stuff too.
Cool.
Okay.
With that, this has been another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. See everybody next time.
Okay.